I wasn't supposed to be working that late. The sun had already dipped behind the rooftops, leaving the street outside washed in that dusty orange glow you only see in small towns before night takes over. My back ached, my hands were black with grease, and the old radio in the corner was playing a song that made me think of my dad. I was halfway under a battered pickup when I heard it, the sharp, uneven cough of a car trying to run but giving up. It stopped right outside my shop. A moment later, heels clicked against the cracked sidewalk. Not the kind of sound you usually hear around here. When I slid out from under the truck, I saw her, mid-20s, polished, completely out of place in this part of town. Her black coupe was parked crooked against the curb, its glossy paint catching the last of the daylight. "Hey, are you open?" she asked, her voice tight with urgency. I wiped my hands on my overalls, taking her in. She looked like she belonged in a high-rise office, not on the wrong side of Main Street. "If you've got a car problem, you're in the right place," I said. "Pop the hood and let's see what's going on." She glanced at her phone like every second counted, then sighed and did as I asked. One look at the engine told me she hadn't been keeping up with it. Coolant was low, a couple of connections were loose. Nothing impossible, but not a quick fix either. "Can you do it fast? I'm on a schedule," she said. I gave a small shrug. "Fast enough, but you'll have to wait." So she stayed, leaning against the wall in those expensive heels, scrolling through her phone while I worked. I kept my head down, pretending not to notice the way she shifted from one foot to the other, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. By the time I closed the hood, the streetlights had come on. She walked over, relief softening her features. "How much?" I told her. "A fair price, nothing more." She reached into her designer bag, pulled out a thick stack of bills and pressed it into my hand. "Keep the change." "That's way too much," I started, but she was already sliding into her car. "Consider it a tip," she called over her shoulder, before the engine purred to life and carried her away into the night. I figured that was the end of it. I had no idea it was just the beginning. I'd barely kicked off my boots that night when there was a knock at the door. Not the polite kind. 3 sharp raps that made the floorboards under my feet hum. When I opened it, a man in a crisp suit stood on my porch, holding a thick envelope. The sight alone was strange enough. Around here, people don't wear tailored suits unless they're going to a funeral or trying to sell you insurance. "Mr. Daniels?" he asked, his tone clipped but polite. "Yeah, who's asking?" He stepped forward, handing me the envelope like it was something valuable. "I'm here on behalf of Miss Lauren Hayes. You repaired her vehicle earlier today." It took me a second to connect the name to the woman with the black coupe. "If there's a problem with the repair..." "There's no problem," he said, cutting me off with the kind of calm you don't argue with. "Miss Hayes wanted to thank you. She prefers to show her gratitude in ways that actually help." I looked down at the envelope. Inside wasn't just cash. It was a receipt showing my entire outstanding loan at the local credit union had been paid off. Every last cent. My stomach flipped. This can't be right," I said, looking back at him. "That was my debt, my problem." "She believes in helping people who do the right thing without expecting anything in return," he replied. "She thought you could use a little breathing room." I let out a laugh that didn't sound like me. "I fixed her car, not her whole life." His mouth curved just slightly, not quite a smile. "Sometimes the smallest things change the biggest things, Mr. Daniels. She'll be in touch." He turned to leave, but I just stood there on the porch, the cool night air creeping in around me, wondering what kind of person pays off a stranger's debt, and what she might want in return. The next morning I was halfway through tightening a stubborn bolt when a shadow fell across the hood. I looked up and nearly dropped my wrench. Lauren Hayes was standing there, no frantic hair, no wrinkled skirt like yesterday. She was put together from head to toe, her confidence filling the room before she even spoke. In the daylight, she didn't just look out of place here. She looked like she'd stepped out of an entirely different world. "Miss Hayes," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." "Lauren," she corrected gently, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "And I figured it was only right to thank you in person." I motioned toward the check still sitting on my desk in plain sight. "Pretty sure that envelope last night took care of that." Her gaze followed mine. That was just a start. I leaned back against the workbench, folding my arms. "Most people drop a $5 tip and drive off. You send a man in a suit to hand over more money than I've ever seen in one place. You'll forgive me if I'm trying to figure out the angle here. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, scanning the shop. The worn tools, the faded posters, the oil stains that wouldn't come out no matter how hard I scrubbed. This your place? For better or worse, I said. It's not bad, she replied softly, but you could do so much more. I chuckled under my breath. Not in this neighbourhood. Folks here barely scrape enough together to keep their cars running. They're not paying premium prices for shiny floors and new equipment. That's the thing, she said, meeting my eyes. I'm not talking about charging more. I'm talking about building more. For you, for them. I shook my head slowly. You don't even know me. She tilted hers. I know enough. My father was a mechanic, just like you. He ran a shop not so different from this one. I watched him work himself to the bone for people who couldn't always pay, because he believed in taking care of his own. He taught me that integrity is worth more than profit. There was a pause between us, the kind that makes you notice the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. So what's your plan? I finally asked. Her smile was small, but it carried a weight I didn't fully understand yet. Dinner, tonight. Let me explain it somewhere that doesn't smell like engine oil. I started to protest, but she was already walking toward the door. 8 o'clock. I'll text you the address, she called over her shoulder. And just like that, she was gone again, leaving me with an unfinished repair, an untouched check, and a growing suspicion that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't see coming. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, my stomach was in knots. I'd spent the afternoon trying to talk myself out of going, telling myself it was none of my business what a rich woman wanted with a small-town mechanic. But curiosity has a way of winning. The address she'd sent led me to an upscale restaurant on the edge of town, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine glasses that caught the light just so. My old pickup looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighbourhood, parked between a row of polished sedans and a spotless vintage convertible. Inside, a hostess in a black dress led me to a private table in the back. Lauren was already there, sitting with the kind of ease you can't fake. Her dress was simple but sharp, her hair perfectly in place. She smiled as I approached. You clean up well, she said, her voice warm but carrying that quiet confidence she seemed to wear like a coat. Thanks, I replied, tugging at the collar of my shirt. Still feel like I'm underdressed. You're fine, she assured me. Then she leaned forward, all small talk gone. I'm sure you've been wondering why I'm doing all this. It's crossed my mind, I admitted. She nodded, taking a slow sip of water before speaking again. I told you my father was a mechanic. What I didn't tell you is that we lost his shop when I was 17. The bank came for it after a bad year, and no one in town could help. I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I'd make sure good people like him, people like you, wouldn't lose everything just because the numbers didn't work out. I listened, the clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation around us fading into the background. You fixed my car without overcharging me, she went on. You didn't try to talk me into repairs I didn't need. That's rare. I want to invest in your shop, upgrade it, give you the tools and space you need to make a bigger impact. I leaned back, letting her words sink in. Sounds like more than just a business deal. It is, she said plainly. I want to start a program. Free training for young people in the community who want to learn the trade. We'd give them a skill, a shot at a decent living. But I can't do it without someone on the ground who knows the work, knows the people. That's you. I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or take her hand right then. And if I say no? She didn't blink. Then you keep the check, no strings attached. But something tells me you're not the kind of man who walks away from a chance to make a difference. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched her, trying to decide if this was real or just some story that sounded good over dinner. But there was no flash in her eyes, no rehearsed pitch, just conviction. For the first time in a long while, I found myself wondering what it would feel like to build something that could outlast me. The paperwork was signed by the end of the week. It felt strange, seeing my name on those documents next to hers, like I'd just agreed to step into a life I didn't quite recognise yet. The first Monday morning, a crew of contractors showed up in trucks that looked newer than anything I'd ever owned. They started ripping out the warped wood panels and rusted sheet metal that had been part of my shop since my father's time. The clang of steel hitting the dumpster echoed through the neighbourhood, drawing curious eyes from the sidewalk. I stood there with my arms crossed, a mix of pride and unease twisting in my gut. Lauren walked in wearing jeans and a simple jacket, looking more like a neighbour than a business mogul. She surveyed the work with the kind of focus that made everyone around her move faster. "You're not just fixing cars anymore," she said, coming to stand beside me. "You're building something that matters." I wanted to believe that, and part of me did, but not everyone saw it that way. By the second week, the whispers started. A couple of local mechanics stopped by, not to congratulate me, but to take a look around like they were sizing me up. One of them, a guy named Tommy Alvarez, who'd been in the business almost as long as I had, didn't bother hiding his glare. "Nice place," he said, though his tone made it sound like an insult. "Guess we can't all have a rich friend paying the bills." I kept my voice steady. "We're trying to do more than just keep the lights on, Tommy. We're going to offer training to kids in the neighbourhood." He cut me off with a snort. "Yeah, sure, sounds real noble, but around here people take care of their own without cameras and charity money." Before I could answer, Lauren stepped forward. "If you have a problem, you can take it up with me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But don't stand here and pretend helping people is a bad thing." Tommy's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "Just remember where you came from," he said, before walking out. The crew kept working and the shop began to change before my eyes. New lifts, clean floors, bright lights. It was becoming something I'd only seen in magazines. But at night, when the noise stopped and the place was quiet again, I'd catch myself wondering if Tommy was right. Was I still the same man who'd started with nothing but a box of tools and an old radio? Or was I turning into someone else entirely? 3 months passed in a blur of sawdust, paint fumes, and the constant buzz of power tools. The shop I'd known my whole life was disappearing piece by piece, replaced by something brighter, cleaner, sharper. It should have felt like progress, and most days it did. But the closer we got to the grand reopening, the heavier the air seemed to get. Word had spread through town. Some folks stopped by just to peek through the windows, their curiosity written all over their faces. A few of my regulars gave me a pat on the back and said they were proud of me. But others, they kept their distance. People I'd shared coffee with at the diner started avoiding eye contact. Conversations went quiet when I walked in. One evening, as I was locking up, I spotted a small group across the street. A couple of guys from the old crowd leaning against a pickup. They weren't talking to me, but I could feel their eyes on my back. That unspoken message was loud enough. "You've changed." Lauren noticed it too. She was in the office going over final invoices when I walked in. "They're not all going to clap when you cut that ribbon," she said, without looking up from her papers. "I know," I replied, dropping into the chair opposite her. "I just thought they'd at least be happy this place is still here." She finally looked at me, her expression steady. Change scares people, especially when it challenges the way they've always done things. "But you're not here to please everyone, Marcus. You're here to make this matter." The morning of the reopening, I woke before dawn. The streets were quiet, the air cool with that hint of early fall. I stood outside the shop for a long moment before unlocking the door, just taking it all in. The sign above the entrance gleamed in the first light, the fresh paint almost glowing. By mid-afternoon, the crowd started gathering. Kids from the neighbourhood, families, old customers, and yes, a few of the skeptics. Lauren stood beside me, a pair of giant scissors in her hand, like something out of a parade. She leaned in, her voice low so only I could hear. "This is your moment," she said. I cut the ribbon, the sound of the blades snapping through the fabric mixing with cheers and polite claps. I smiled, but in the corner of my eye I caught a few familiar faces with arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Not everyone was convinced, and in that moment I understood something. This wasn't an ending. It was the start of a fight to prove this place, and the people in it, were worth believing in. The first few weeks after the reopening were busier than I'd dared to hope. The new lifts hummed all day, the waiting area smelled faintly of fresh coffee instead of motor oil, and the training program drew in more teenagers than we'd planned for. Watching them crowd around an engine bay, arguing over the right socket size, reminded me of myself at their age, hungry to learn, even if I didn't have much else going for me. Lauren stopped by almost every day, not to hover, but to check in, roll up her sleeves, and talk with the kids like they were already part of something important. The energy in the shop was good, hopeful. But outside the walls, things were different. It started with a spray-painted word across the side of the building one Monday morning, "Traitor" in bright red letters. I stood there staring at it, the smell of paint still hanging in the air, when Lauren pulled up. Her jaw tightened the second she saw it. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice cold enough to make the hairs on my arm stand up. "I don't know," I said, reaching for a scrub brush. "And honestly, it doesn't matter. I'll take care of it." "It matters," she said firmly. "This isn't just about you anymore. This is about what we're building." We scrubbed the wall together, the red fading into pale streaks until it was gone. But I could still feel it there. Not the paint, but the message. Later that week, I overheard two guys at the diner talking about how I'd sold out, how the shop wasn't mine anymore, how I was just another face working for someone with deep pockets. I wanted to walk over, set them straight, but I stayed put. Sometimes silence is easier than explaining yourself to people who've already made up their minds. Lauren didn't see it that way. "Let them talk," she told me one evening as we locked up. "People will always find something to complain about. Our job is to keep moving forward." Her confidence was steadying, but the weight on my shoulders wasn't getting any lighter. For every smile from a customer, there was a cold stare from someone who thought I'd crossed some invisible line. And deep down, I knew the whispers weren't going to fade on their own. Something bigger was coming. I could feel it, like the air just before a summer storm. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind of day when the work drags and the sun feels heavier than it should. I was closing up, sweeping the last bit of dust toward the shop's open door, when I noticed 3 figures standing at the edge of the lot. Tommy Alvarez was in front, arms crossed, his expression a mix of anger and something darker. 2 other guys flanked him, familiar faces from other garages in town. They weren't here for an oil change. "You got a minute?" Tommy called out, his tone already telling me it wasn't really a question. I set the broom aside, stepping out into the cooling air. "What's on your mind?" He smirked, but there was no humour in it. "You think you're better than the rest of us now, with your shiny floors and your charity project?" I kept my voice even. "I'm just trying to run my business, Tommy, nothing more." "Your business?" he scoffed, glancing toward the office where Lauren's light was still on. "Let's be honest, this place isn't yours anymore. She owns it, you're just the face she trots out for the neighbourhood." Something hot flared in my chest, but I kept it under control. "You want to say something about me? Go ahead, but leave her out of it." One of his friends muttered something under his breath, and Tommy stepped closer. "You used to be one of us, Marcus. Now you're just theirs." The sound of footsteps cut through the tension. Lauren emerged from the office, calm as ever. "Is there a problem here?" Tommy didn't back down, but his eyes flickered when she looked straight at him. "We don't like what you're doing here," he said flatly. "We?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or just you?" The silence that followed said enough. I stepped between them. Not because I thought she needed protecting, but because I didn't want this turning into something we couldn't walk back from. "We're done here," I said, meeting Tommy's eyes. "If you've got a problem with me, we'll handle it another time. Not here, not now." He held my stare for a long moment before finally stepping back. "This isn't over," he muttered, turning toward the street with his crew. Lauren waited until they were out of sight before speaking. "That won't be the last time he tries something," she said quietly. "I can handle it," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. Her gaze softened. "You don't have to handle it alone." And just like that, she went back inside, leaving me standing in the cooling evening air, knowing deep down she was right, but not ready to admit it yet. The tension didn't just hang in the air, it settled into the days, a quiet hum you couldn't ignore. Business was still steady, but every time I saw a shadow linger too long outside the shop or caught a stranger's truck idling at the corner, my gut tightened. It didn't take long for Tommy to make his next move. One Friday morning, I pulled into the lot and froze. 3 cars parked outside, all belonging to customers who'd dropped them off the night before, sat on flat tyres. Not just 1 or 2 tyres either, every single one. I walked around the vehicles, my hands clenching into fists. The cuts in the rubber were clean, this wasn't random. Lauren arrived minutes later. One look at the scene and her expression hardened. "This is deliberate," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, and I can guess who's behind it." She didn't hesitate. "We're calling the police." I shook my head. That'll just stir the pot. We fix the tyres, get the cars back to the customers, and move on. Her eyes locked on mine. Moving on doesn't mean letting people walk over you. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my tools and got to work. The hum of the air compressor filled the space as I patched and replaced, each hiss of air into the new tyres feeling like a quiet act of defiance. The customers were understanding when they picked up their cars, but I saw the concern in their faces. That silent question, what's going on here? That night, I was the last one out. The street was empty, the hum of the streetlights the only sound. I locked the doors, turned toward my truck, and saw movement across the lot. 3 figures stepped out from behind the dumpster, and in the middle was Tommy. "Working late, Marcus?" His voice carried easily in the stillness. "Go home, Tommy," I said, my tone flat. He took a step closer, the other 2 following his lead. "No, see, I think you're the one who should pack it up before something happens to that shiny shop of yours." My hands curled, but I stayed where I was. "You want to throw punches, do it now, otherwise get off my property." For a moment, I thought he might actually swing. Then the distant sound of a car approaching broke the standoff. Tommy smirked, backing away. "Enjoy your night, big shot, this isn't over." I watched them disappear into the dark, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I told Lauren the next morning, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just looked at me with that steady calm and said, "If they want to fight, we'll be ready." And for the first time, I realised she didn't just mean the shop, she meant us. It was a Wednesday night, quiet enough that the ticking of the wall clock felt loud. I was finishing up a brake job when the sound of shattering glass ripped through the stillness. I dropped the wrench and ran out front. The shop's big window was in pieces, glittering under the streetlight. Standing there, holding a crowbar in one hand and reeking of cheap whiskey, was Tommy. His eyes were bloodshot, his stance unsteady, the kind of anger fueled by a long night at the bar. "This ends tonight," he slurred, his voice rough. "Put it down, Tommy," I said, my voice low but steady. Instead, he took a stumbling step forward. "You've been a thorn in my side long enough. Time someone put you back in your place." My pulse pounded in my ears. "You're drunk. Go home before you make it worse." That only lit the fuse. He swung the crowbar, wild and clumsy, and instinct took over. I dodged, grabbed his arm, and we wrestled, glass crunching under our boots. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard tyres screech to a stop outside. Lauren's voice cut through everything. "Enough!" Her tone froze us both. She stood at the curb, phone in hand, eyes locked on Tommy. "The police are already on their way." For a moment he wavered, then the distant wail of sirens made his grip loosen. He let the crowbar clatter to the ground and stumbled back. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning and disappearing into the dark. The officers took my statement, the flashing lights throwing sharp shadows across the shop floor. Tommy was picked up a few blocks away. When it was finally quiet again, Lauren and I stood among the shards of glass. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my chest still felt tight. "Yeah, but I'm done looking over my shoulder." She placed a hand on my arm. "You won't have to. Not anymore. Kindness and integrity can open doors you never expected. When you help others without expecting anything in return, you might not only change their life, you could change your own." Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one, right here on Rain Inside.